Of GB News, this is Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. The weekend starts here, so bring your own drinks. The admission is free. On tonight's show, as Jews are hunted in the streets of Amsterdam after a football match, is it time to end the West's multicultural experiment? Is Jeremy Clarkson right that Sir Keir Starmer is the farmer harmer? As they try to build bridges with Donald Trump's new team about how they're going to do trade relations, are Angela Rayner and David Lammy a national embarrassment? As it's revealed, left-wing American women are depriving their partners in the bedroom for voting for Donald Trump. Is it wrong to use sex as a political weapon? And should Nigel Farage be made the UK ambassador to the United States in order to save the special relationship? For feisty debate and plenty of lols, tonight's Friday A-Team, fearless political commentator Emma Wolfe, BBC radio icon Liz Kershaw, and the man who helped Jeremy Corbyn win more votes than Sir Keir Starmer, Jezza's former spokesman, Matt Zarb-Cousin. So, lots to get through, but first up, in my Friday feeling monologue, why Trump's victory is annoying all of the right people, and why the Donald's anti-woke revolution will be coming here next. First, though, the news headlines and the one and only Sophia Hill.
Thank you, Mark. Very good evening. It's just gone 8 o'clock. I'm Sophia Hill in the GB newsroom. Your top story this evening, the Metropolitan Police has referred itself to the police watchdog over complaints from 2 women about the handling of investigations into allegations made against Mohammed Al-Fayed. The complaints were initially made in 2008 and 2013, and the Met have raised concerns about the quality of police response. Commander Stephen Clayman from the Met Specialist Crime Team said they're actively reviewing 21 allegations reported to the police to determine if additional investigative steps are available or there are things that we could have done better. President Biden has said that the anti-Semitic attacks on Israeli football fans in Amsterdam are despicable and echo dark moments in history. This follows an independent investigation launched by Dutch authorities into an incident where Israeli football fans were attacked when leaving their Europa League match between Ajax and Maccabi Tel Aviv. The public prosecutor says 62 arrests have been made and the Dutch Prime Minister has condemned the anti-Semitic attacks. Before the match, there was trouble between Maccabi fans and pro-Palestinian protesters, with Maccabi supporters reportedly attacking a taxi and setting a Palestinian flag on fire.
Really late.
They came too late.
They came when a lot of people were already hurted, injured. Some of them probably go to the hospital. I don't know if they 100 shown information.
The United States has charged an Iranian man in connection with an alleged plot to assassinate President-elect Donald Trump. In a statement, the department said that Farhad Shakari had informed law enforcement that he was tasked on October the 7th, 2024, with providing a plan to kill Trump. The department described Shakari as an Iranian asset residing in Tehran. It said that he immigrated to the US as a child and was then deported in 2008 following a robbery conviction. And it's been announced that the Princess of Wales is to attend 2 Remembrance Day events this weekend. Buckingham Palace said that Kate would attend both the Remembrance Day Sunday service at the Cenotaph and the Festival of Remembrance at the Royal Albert Hall tomorrow. But the Palace says the Queen's attendance at Remembrance will be subject to medical advice nearer the time. Queen Camilla is unwell with a chest infection and was forced to pull out of engagements earlier this week. Now, nearly 2,000 fake Paddington Bear items worth more than £15,000 have been seized in a crackdown on counterfeit merchandise. Nearly 2,000 fake items have been confiscated from shops across Notting Hill, where scenes from the Paddington Bear film franchise were filmed. A Trading Standards raid in Portobello Road recovered 1,500 fakes, including tote bags that were being sold for £10 each. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophia Hill. More in an hour, but now it's back to Mark.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sophia. Now, forget about global warming. I'm starting to think it is left-wing tears that will cause sea levels to rise dangerously in the years ahead. The best thing about Donald Trump's extraordinary victory on Tuesday was the hysterical reaction from the illiberal left-wing elite on both sides of the pond. Whether the Trump presidency is a success or not, and despite his many flaws, I predict it will be, who cares? Because either way, this victory has annoyed all of the right people and will make their lives a misery for the next 4 years. I'm talking about the pompous millionaire celebrities, insulated from the grim real-world consequences of the woke policies that they promote. For example, here is US talk show host Stephen Colbert. He's worth about $50 million, but frankly, I'm worried about his mental health. Someone should check in on him.
Hey there. How are you doing? If you watch the show regularly, I'm guessing you're not doing great. Yeah, me neither.
Oh dear, time for a padded cell, I think. Keep Stephen away from any sharp objects. How revealing that he says, if you watch the show regularly, I guess you're not doing great. An admission, if you needed it, that these entertainment shows are a complete leftist echo chamber, just like Have I Got News for You here in the UK. By the way, that show's on later tonight, and it will be a wake, let me tell you. I do hope that Ian Hislop's next of kin have been notified. What a shame that we will have to wait 5 long years for a cultural and political revolution like that to happen here. But don't worry, it is coming. Let's hope Starmer hasn't turned Britain into a floating island of garbage like Puerto Rico by then. This week, ordinary Americans elected a billionaire that they felt was on their side, Donald J. Trump. And they rejected the advice of other billionaires like Oprah Winfrey and Taylor Swift, who they know are not, living in their gated mansions, insulated from the massive human and financial cost of net zero, open borders and wokery in America's public institutions. We've seen a lot of hysteria here as well. The Guardian is offering counselling to its staff, who these days outnumber their readers. As the excellent lawyer Stephen Barrett points out on X today, The Guardian didn't need therapy to get through the Northern rape gangs scandal, or the child killings in Southport, or the atrocity on October the 7th. Things they do need therapy for: democracy. Meanwhile, comedy actress Rosie Holt tweeted, "I hear all your takes on why Kamala lost, thank you, but are we allowed to have the take that Trump supporters are simply the worst?" Well, who are these terrible Trump supporters, this nasty fringe? Well, it's 73.5 million Americans and counting. Women of all backgrounds, African-American men, Latinos, gay people, and millions of immigrants. Oh, the irony. But US voters, a clear majority of whom chose Donald Trump, are dismissed as the worst by an elite class who are beginning to realise not only how detested they are by ordinary folk, but how powerless they are as well. An 80% left-wing bias in US media, and celebs from Robert De Niro to Madonna to George Clooney, simply contributed to a Kamala Harris electoral bloodbath. In other words, it didn't work. It actually had the opposite effect. The former editor of The Sun here in the UK, and a man that went into bat to defend Hugh Edwards when the BBC star was making headlines, tweeted the following: "Nobody I love, like or know very well is celebrating the US election." Well, David, I think you might need to change your friendship group, or perhaps leave the house. Former BBC star Emily Maitlis was so distraught, she went into a swearing frenzy, and Channel 4 had to apologise. Maybe Prince Andrew should interview her about this fall from grace. Lol. Woke multimillionaire singing sensation Barbra Streisand simply said, "There are no words left." Well, let's hope she keeps to that. Comedian David Baddiel ranted, "It might be time to accept that people are more energised by hate than hope." reminding us of the lefty trope that anyone who thinks differently to you is guilty of hate or a bad person. Carol Vorderman, whose numbers haven't added up for a long time, said, quite simply, God help America. And broadcaster James O'Brien, who works in local radio in London, simply said, what fresh hell is this? Well, the American public have told the smug media elite to go to hell. In 5 years' time, the British public will do exactly the same. It'll be messy, so bring popcorn and a box of tissues to mop up all those tears. For reaction to my Friday feeling, I'm delighted to welcome three fabulous people, my top pundits. Let me tell you in no particular order. We've got Emma, we've got Liz, and we've got Matt. So let's crack on. Folks, so much to sink our teeth into on tonight's show. Matt, let me start with you, because you're a brand new star on the programme. Welcome to Friday Night Live.
Thanks for having me.
Basically, the smug media elite, they've got no influence whatsoever, have they? They've lost this election.
What's interesting to me, though, is you've just reeled off a lot of what I would describe as liberals, and you associate them with the left. Now, as someone who is ostensibly on the left, I do not claim them.
You're a proper lefty, aren't you?
I'm a proper lefty because I understand that the liberal economic order that was working for most people till the global financial crisis in 2008 has broken down. It's not delivering increasing living standards. It's working people have had a raw deal, and Obama swept to victory on a populist campaign, promising to do a lot, and he just bailed out Wall Street. So I think that the American people are rightly fed up with the Democrats. They don't trust them to change things sufficiently. And I think the Democrats were blamed as well for inflation, for prices going up, things that are, to an extent, under the government's control. But I think that people really felt the economic impact of the last 10 years in their pockets. And I don't think that the Democrats had the answers. It was just more of the same.
Indeed, and these celebrity endorsements, if anything, backfired, didn't they?
I feel like the Democrats were more concerned with getting the kind of support of Queen Latifah than actually, having a proper programme that was convincing. I was very, very impressed with the way that the Republicans, including J.D. Vance, was communicating the economic agenda that they had, and it was very anti-corporate. It was very, basically they think big pharma's ripping people off. There was lots of really kind of, I'd say, Bernie sort of sentiments in there.
Bernie Sanders, who is actually America's Jeremy Corbyn.
I'd say that...
What was amazing as Donald Trump's idea to remove taxes on tips, for example, which was then quickly adopted by the Democrats, but came from the Republicans originally.
This is the problem. I think the establishment Democrats have become too close to corporate and vested interests. And this was a rejection of establishment liberalism. And really, unless the left gets its act together and offers an alternative to establishment liberalism, then of course people are going to go for someone like Trump. So I'm not surprised that he won. In fact, I expected him to win. Vice presidents historically have done very, very badly when they've run, especially without a primary. So I think that the Democrats really have a lot of soul-searching to do.
OK. All right, Emma, I mean, how do you think this has gone down, this news, among the sort of liberal elite on both sides of the pond? Multi-millionaire actors, singers, TV presenters, that kind of thing.
Well, you see I'm wearing my red dress in celebration. You're wearing your red tie. No, I've been on a high since Tuesday. It's absolutely glorious. And you say the anti-woke revolution is coming here, Mark. I really hope you're right. And we have another 4.5 years of this. God help America. What about God help us?
I know. Do you think we're out of step
I actually feel
with the direction of travel politically and culturally? Because we've just elected a very left-wing Labour government, haven't we?
But I think that our turnout was incredibly low. I don't think that Starmer represents... I don't think the Labour government represent the people of this country. But I think that Tuesday was beautiful because this is democracy actually working. This is a reminder. It's a reckoning. This is a reminder that the vote of the working man in Wisconsin and wherever is worth exactly the same as the vote of George Clooney, Oprah, J-Lo, every single other person. This was a massive, massive backlash against the net zero obsession, against the obsession with having your children being trans, against with having women's sanitary products in men's bathrooms. These are not the issues that regular, normal folk, and I don't mean rednecks, I mean regular working people in America, care about.
Indeed. Do you think the same will happen here in 4 or 5 years' time, Liz?
No, hopefully it'll happen a lot sooner.
How is that possible mathematically, given Labour's majority?
Well, things can go horribly wrong, and they already have. I mean, we're going to be discussing later, should Nigel Farage step in and help repair the special relationship, and I'll be saying no. Let them stew in their own juice. Let them be shown for what they really are. I think it might come to a point where their position is just untenable, I'm hoping, and they might have to call an election. I said two-tier steer. 2-year Kia.
2-year Kia.
From the start, yeah. I created that hashtag.
He's also, by the way...
There are other things that rhyme with steer and,
there are
Kia.
I've got to say, he's got the most memeable name out there, poor old Starmer, hasn't he? 2-tier Kia, Serbia Starmer, or indeed Starmer the Farmer Harmer, but we'll come to that in the next part.
Yeah. I don't think that we're going against the tide. And the tide is across Europe, in Holland,
Italy,
France, the Marine Le Pen's RN party.
Meloni in Italy.
Yeah. All over Europe, in Germany. And, of course, you've got, Poland and the other eastern countries. We only got the government we've got because the Conservative vote was split. We all know that. If you had the Reform and Conservative vote together, there were more people voting for those kind of policies and those principles than there were for anything Labour was advocating. But, I mean, at 5 o'clock in the morning, when it was evident that on the 6th of November that Trump was going to become the president, that's exactly what I tweeted. At last, the tidal wave of woke is being turned, because I think, yes, people were voting for the economy, they were voting for the cost of living, they were voting for all sorts of things.
The border.
The immigration, but it all adds together that what they were voting for was to preserve Western culture and civilization and the way of life and freedoms that we enjoy. There was, along with Elon Musk, he achieved that. He saved freedom of speech.
Well, there you go. Well, listen.
And I think it's a much safer world.
There you go. Plenty of freedom of speech tonight, because still to come, as Jews are hunted in the streets of Amsterdam after a football match, is it time to end the West's multicultural experiment? And should Nigel Farage be made the UK ambassador to the United States in order to save the special relationship?
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
This is reported in the Telegraph today, and it's about being white or being coloured or being anti-racist. Is Monopoly a racist game?
This is an incredible story, actually, I have to say. I'm reading this from the Mail. It's in Telegraph as well, but from the Mail. Children should be playing Monopoly to learn about racial privilege, councils claim. White players should be given more money, spend less time in jail, and also be given a head start on buying property to convey inequality and white supremacy. And this all, I'm not making this up, and this all comes from a document called How to Raise Anti-Racist Children, which was drawn up for the Barbie manufacturer Mattel in 2020, and it's been endorsed, or at least circulated, by Leicestershire County Council, Southampton City Council, Lambeth London Borough and City of London Corporation, who apparently think this is a sensible way to go forward. I mean, for goodness sake, Monopoly is just a bit of fun, isn't it? Let's just enjoy it.
It's a wonderful example of how anti-racist thinking becomes racist. What they're saying is that white children should be given privileges on the Monopoly board.
Because they've got it in real life.
So that they learn that they already have privilege. Do we really think children are going to think that? Or do we really think children are going to think, oh, great, I have an advantage? White children are going to think, great, I have an advantage.
They're going to think, oh, no, I've landed on Mayfair and there's 4 houses there.
It's wonderfully stupid.
We've also heard it with nursery rhymes as well, though, haven't we? And mums and dads being told not to sing Bar Bar Black Sheep.
That's in the story as well, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's steeped in white culture. And what a lot of nonsense that is as well.
What are you meant to sing instead?
Well, Bar Bar, I don't know, White Sheep, perhaps, I don't know.
Or Rainbow Sheep or something.
Wah Wah White Sheep. You can say Wah Wah White Sheep as they play Monopoly with their privileges.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Nightmare commute. kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
As Jews are hunted in the streets of Amsterdam after a football match, is it time to end the West's multicultural experiment? Liz Kershaw.
I think the scenes there were the scariest things that I've seen so far of all the shocking events of violence on the streets in Europe in the last few years.
Yeah.
That was just bringing it right home, and it's a very timely series that's just ended on BBC Two, and it's The Tale of Two Houses. They've done a series like this in Bristol and towns around the UK before, but this was a special series, 4 episodes, please watch it, where they took a block of flats near here in Marylebone, and they took a block of flats in Berlin, and they looked at the history of who lived there and what happened to them from the 1930s. And the block of flats in Berlin, by the time the war was over, about 75% of those people had been exterminated in concentration camps.
Crazy.
And it described exactly what happened to them, the way that they were hounded out and then rounded up and then exterminated. And I think you've got to ask yourself, I lived next door to a Jewish couple when I lived in Crouch End in London, and they had a child the same time as we did. And we were very friendly. And at the time I was reading a book called The Past Is Myself by Christabel Bielenberg, and she'd married a German just before the war. And she related how she'd had to think about how she dealt with her Jewish neighbours, and should she help them, or would it put her own child in jeopardy? I remember thinking, what would I do in that situation? And then I thought, I'm never going to have to think about that in my lifetime. Well, I am.
Yeah.
I am now.
Most definitely. I mean, the BBC described what happened in Amsterdam last night as clashes, and The Guardian have talked about sort of Israelis targeted. No, this was an exercise in Jew hunting, wasn't it?
It's absolutely appalling. Jews have had a terrible, terrible time since October the 7th.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I would agree with multicultural experiment. It's something else. I think most countries in Europe have always welcomed, movement across borders. I think this is a very, very welcoming country. But I think when you get this imbalance that we've got at the moment, people coming here illegally on small boats and being given asylum in various different ways, or just falling through the system, there's something that's gone very, very wrong.
Whether it's legal or illegal immigration, if there are people in European countries like Holland or the UK that are hunting Jews, then this is a failure of multiculturalism, isn't it?
Of course it is, yes. Yes, I would agree with that.
I mean, is it just Matt, what do you think? Is it an isolated incident? Are we overreacting? Because many people are on X tonight just saying, basically the genie's out of the lamp and it can't go back in.
Yeah, I think this is a really good example of how, we all get different angles of events, and it's almost like an information war that's going on. Because in my Twitter feed or my X feed, I've seen videos of Maccabi Tel Aviv fans ripping down Palestine flags, chanting death to Arabs, saying there's no schools in Gaza because all the children are dead, singing very insightful kind of chants. And we know that Maccabi Tel Aviv fans are historically a very right-wing fan base, very aggressive, and they've got a lot of hooligans.
Bad as Chelsea?
I think they're Israel's equivalent of Chelsea.
I'm only kidding.
So, I mean, it's...
I've got a Chelsea sporting producer.
Look, I mean, I think that it's important that that's put in context. If people are being hunted on streets because they're Jewish, that's terrible, obviously. No one's disagreeing with that. But I think that what we had here was lots of fans coming over from Israel to support the team, and then they were obviously... There was some kind of, you know, antagonism there as well. So.
OK, all right. Well, look, it's important to see these things in a 360-degree perspective. We'll come back to that shortly, no doubt. But moving on, who knew that Nigel Farage, Britain's disruptor-in-chief and the most consequential politician of his generation, could prove to be Sir Keir Starmer's greatest political ally? After Starmer himself, his Foreign Secretary David Lammy, Wes Streeting and Angela Rayner have spent the last few years being incredibly offensive about Donald Trump. They've spent the last couple of days desperately backtracking and making grovelling phone calls to key figures in the new administration. Having attacked Trump so vociferously over so many years demonstrates the profound ineptitude and lack of political judgment that is Starmer's Labour Party. How could they have been so obnoxious and offensive about someone whose track record demonstrated that he was very likely to return to the White House at some point? It was naive in the extreme. Student politics, you could say. Talk about burning your bridges. Perhaps Starmer and co were being so rude about Trump because they didn't think for a second that they would ever win power. And perhaps Lammy was so rude about Trump back in the day because he didn't think that Starmer would ever be mad enough to make him Foreign Secretary. Well, here we are. So what hope of a trade deal with the USA with this shower in charge? Enter, stage left, the heroic Nigel Farage, the new UK ambassador to the US. Like a knight in shining armour. What do we think? Should the Reform UK leader be promoted to this top diplomatic post? Can Nigel Farage save the special relationship? Emma Wolf.
Well, no, it's never going to happen. There is no way. There is probably nobody that Starmer and his cronies hate more than Nigel Farage. It's not going to happen. Farage would be good. He would be good. He's proud of Britain. Trump is proud of America. They get on well. I think Nigel exaggerates a little bit their friendship.
Well, I don't know. I mean, whenever Nigel's at the rally, he always gets a name check.
He always manages to get a selfie, but when you get a selfie with someone, to me, that's more staged than just kind of hanging out.
I mean, I know he always name checks Nigel and talks about what a great guy he is.
It's true. No, he does. But the idea that Starmer would ever elect Farage or put Farage in as his... No, I mean, he needs to get rid of Lammy.
What about Farage? I mean, do you think Farage... There's no love lost between him and Starmer. Do you think he will put the national interest above his personal rivalry with Starmer and still help?
Well, it's just embarrassing what Lammy and Rayner and Wes Streeting and Sadiq Khan have been saying about Trump. It shows, as you say, absolute lack of political judgment, of even just being grown-ups. Just being grown-ups, being diplomatic, as any politician needs to think a little bit about the future. You can't just go around slagging people off.
Kemi Badenoch was asked at the GB News leadership debate fronted by the brilliant Christopher Hope. And towards the end of the debate, she was asked, you know, which candidate she favoured, Trump or Carmona. She said they're both excellent candidates.
And that's what you do. You have to... I mean, at that stage, it was on a knife edge. Well, I don't think it was on a knife edge.
What do you think? But does he help Starmer or does he throw him under the bus? Well, what do you do if you're Nigel Farage tonight? Because it is a political dilemma for him, isn't it?
I don't see why he should help Starmer particularly.
What do you think about this, Liz?
As I touched on earlier, I think he should bide his time. He's got a job to do. He's got a political party to run. He's got a constituency to serve. He's got a party base to build. He's got a lot more by-elections to win, as they have this week, but that was hardly reported. That went under the radar, but very significant. I think he could just sit back and let the Labour Party, the Labour government, implode and be ready to take over. Why would he give the family silver of the Reform Party his help, his links with the most powerful man in the world? Why would he give that away to help the Labour Party.
Well, what do you think about that? I mean, will Farage put the national interest first, do you think, or will he play party politics with this?
I think that actually Keir's got a bigger problem coming down the track, which is that I actually think that Trump loves Britain and he loves the royal family and he's got ties to Britain, obviously golf courses here and all that sort of stuff, right? So he actually is a very big fan of this country, regardless of who the Prime Minister is. And I think what he's going to do is offer a trade deal, actually, but it's going to be one that will mean that we have to diverge from the EU.
Yes.
And then
It's only the kind of trade deal that we could get thanks to Brexit, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, this is the thing, and Keir's going to have a bigger problem then, because does he accept that trade deal and sort of cut ties with the EU?
Yeah.
Which is obviously going to undermine his support base. So I think that's coming down the track. Regardless of who the ambassador is, I doubt that he's going to be considering Nigel Farage. I think Nigel Farage is going to, he's got a job to do in Clacton more than anything else.
Yes, fascinating, isn't it? I will tell you that a top financial economist at the FT is suggesting that Trump's team are already making noises about a trade deal.
Yeah, it's like, the Americans have had bases on British soil for decades because of its proximity to Europe. So they could have a launch pad for military operations. They can see it, surely, as a launch. I don't want to become the 51st or 52nd state, it might be now, but they surely see the potential of our proximity to the European mainland for investing in manufacture here rather than lugging stuff across the big pond. I'm sure there's plenty of potential.
Well, I tend to agree with you, but listen, folks, lots more to get through tonight. Is Jeremy Clarkson right that Sir Keir Starmer is the farmer harmer? And as they try to build bridges with Donald Trump, are Angela Rayner and David Lammy a national embarrassment? And should Starmer fire Lammy for his offensive remarks about the new US president?
Evening. Thanks for joining me for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Kind of more of the same tomorrow. The weather patterns are slowly starting to shift, but again, grey and dry for most tomorrow. But there'll be, again, some sunshine in northern Scotland. High pressure is still sitting to the east, keeping the weather fronts at bay for now. A bit of drizzle here and there today, particularly across southwest England, staying a bit damp and drizzly and dank across the south coast of England tonight, and turning that way too across parts of the east, northeast England into eastern Scotland, seeing some drizzle. Northwest Scotland, keeping the clear skies. Could see some fog here, and certainly temperatures in sheltered glens likely to get down close to freezing. For most, though, we'll start the weekend at 6 or 7, 9 or 10 in the west. On to Saturday. And it is kind of dry and cloudy, but there will be a bit more in the way of drizzle, perhaps along the south coast of England. Again, mostly over the hills, so the moors in the southwest, seeing a bit of drizzle. But also northeastern parts of England, a bit dank and drizzly here, and some of that working into eastern Scotland. Cloudy for Northern Ireland, but western Scotland doing OK for sunshine. There will be some fog around, first thing, and actually that fog could be quite stubborn. It could persist for much of the day, but generally it's the far northwest which will see the bluest of the skies. Elsewhere, again, a pretty grey day. Some drizzle at times on eastern coasts and across the south, but many areas just dry and dull, and a little colder than it has been for much of this week. Temperatures struggling, particularly across central and eastern England, only 8-9 degrees, and with that drizzle feeling even cooler. Further west, we should climb into the teens. Now, on Sunday, we will start to see more of a change, a bit more in the way of wet weather coming into the west. Outbreaks of rain and drizzle, nothing too heavy, but behind this band of rain, western Scotland and Northern Ireland should get brighter for the afternoon. Most of England and Wales staying pretty grey, but some brightness likely in the east on Sunday. So a brighter day here, and also for most of us, a little warmer on Sunday too.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment. This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory. Don't miss my big opinion. Mark meets and my take at 10. Democracy is a funny old thing. And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it. Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it. That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
As they try to build bridges with Donald Trump's new team after being rude about him for years, are Angela Rayner and David Lammy a national embarrassment? Matthew?
Oh, I mean, lots of members of the Labour cabinet said a lot of things in the last few years to try to pitch left to Labour membership that was supporting Jeremy Corbyn. They said a lot of things that were a little bit kind of, I guess, populist.
So they were posturing and they were showing the Labour left a bit of leg?
I think that's probably fair. But I think with Lammy, he's been doing a hell of a lot of work to try to build bridges with the Republicans. He's been going to dinners with Trump. He's been meeting senior Republicans. And then during the election, it came out that Labour was sending 100 staffers over to campaign for Kamala. And I just thought that is such a, an unforced error, really, because you're trying to do these, like, sort of diplomatic things and you're just really undermining yourself. So I didn't understand that. I didn't understand what Labour were trying to do in the campaign when they were sending their advisors over to help with strategy for Kamala. I don't really understand why they're getting involved. But thankfully for Starmer, I think, because Trump loves Britain so much, it's not going to undermine the special relationship, which I think is, good from our perspective.
Do you think that Starmer should fire David Lammy in order to preserve the special relationship and send a clear message to Donald Trump that he's really sorry?
Who would be a better replacement? That's my first question. Yes, are they a national embarrassment? They are, actually. I was embarrassed when David Lammy went out there in his black trainers to meet Joe Biden. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
I mean, that's just not how you meet the leader of the free
Correct.
world. I'm embarrassed.
Yeah, I think they were Sports Direct style, weren't they?
They really
the kind
were.
you
They
buy
were
for your
pretty poor.
14-year-old son when he goes off to school.
Yeah, exactly. They were not quite as
Not the
smart
foreign
as regular
secretary.
school shoes, even. I was embarrassed at the thought. I was cringing at the thought of Angela Rayner's phone call with J.D. Vance yesterday. I mean, what was that like?
Yeah, I'm hoping it wasn't a video call and she didn't do her Sharon Stone routine.
Well, did you see her giving
that would definitely destroy the special
big
relationship.
Speech the other night with her phone hanging around her like a handbag, like a teenage girl. You don't need your phone when you stand up to give a major speech. Anyway, the woman, yes, but I think his top team, for me, I'm sorry, Matt, but they are a national embarrassment.
It's not a high-calibre team, is it?
It's not.
The caliber's really rather poor.
Really poor.
But that's a question for Starmer. Does he fire Lammy? Because it would send a clear message to Washington, wouldn't it?
I don't think it matters. I mean, the one thing that I can agree with, the weeping lefties at the moment, is that Trump is a narcissist. And that has its attributes when you're doing that kind of job. And you've got to have total self-belief. He won't give a stuff
He won't care
about Lammy. He'll think it's hilarious. He'll think she's a joke, which she is. Are these the best people we can come up with?
OK, of course, Labour would argue that the Tories have made a complete Horlicks of international relations in the last few years. Many would argue that Brexit has separated Britain from the international community and that what David Lammy is going to do is rebuild bridges with America and the EU. They certainly have a mandate to do just that. But moving on. Petrolhead turned farmer Jeremy Clarkson has seen his anger going into top gear today with news that the National Farmers Union have cancelled a planned protest in central London to complain about Rachel Reeves' cash grab of farmers' assets with that 20% inheritance tax on farms worth over £1 million. Now, fair play to the very wealthy Jeremy Clarkson, who is not going to be affected by this tax raid. But such were his concerns about other members of the farming community that he actually booked a coach to drive down to Westminster to offer his support. Whilst the police have not banned the event, it seems the NFU were warned against causing any disruption. Now, as Clarkson points out, it seems the eco-protesters who have glued themselves to the motorway and damaged property are allowed to protest. And he added that perhaps he would get away with driving a tractor into central London and causing chaos as long as the tractor was draped in a pro-Palestine flag. Either way, it's interesting how protesters are allowed to take to the streets and cause disruption in relation to a conflict thousands of miles away. But it seems that the good men and women of this country who tend to the land and who put food on the dinner table are deprived of a voice. Let me tell you, I've got beef with the way this government is treating farmers. All they're doing is milking them, and it's utter bollocks. Matthew, do Labour have a problem with farmers and the rural community?
I think this is one of those things where it could have been avoided. If you want to raise taxes, there are other ways you can raise taxes that aren't going to create this kind of backlash. To be honest, I think if they want to protest, I'd fully support that anyone's right to protest over anything, really. But I think, if you look at what taxes were raised in the budget and what wasn't raised, so remote gaming duty, for example, tax on online casinos, which raked it in during the pandemic, that could have raised more money raising those taxes, bringing them into line with international standards.
So the gambling firms, they make millions, don't they?
They make billions.
Billions.
They make billions, and that could have raised much more than something like this. And I find that what she's done is, I know that they're obviously ironing out the details and they're going to give them 10 years to pay the tax and all that sort of stuff. But what she's done is I think she's tried to avoid taxing big business in any way, shape or form. And this has, as a result of that, led to tax on things like employment. I think actually having the national insurance increase is going to be a bit of a disaster for the service sector as well, because if you own a hairdresser's, your employment costs are 60% of your overall turnover. So that's going to put a lot of hairdressers and beauty businesses out.
And the supermarkets have said it's a disaster. Sainsbury's and Morrison's are both.
So that's going to feed through to inflation. So just this aversion to not taxing big business sufficiently, including the gambling industry, has led to, I think, lots of these other knock-on effects.
Although, Liz, the knock-on effect comes from a dreadful 14 years of Tory rule, doesn't it? Basically, the country's broke, and that's why Rachel Reeves has to make these tough choices.
Oh, please, you don't mean that, so I'm not even going to argue with you.
Well, the economy is not exactly... it's not exactly thriving, is it?
No, and it wasn't before, because the big crash, economic crash, global, happened in 2007, 2008, and it's not been the same since then. But on the subject of taxing farmers, I say don't tax the producers, tax the processors. You talked about big business. The food that comes straight from the farm is good food. The food that then goes through a factory and has all sorts of additives and salt and reduced fat, but loads of sugar, that's what's causing obesity and ill health. And the food processors have got a grip on food supply to the supermarkets. So tax them. There's already VAT on foods that the government secretly knows aren't proper nourishment. So you pay VAT on, biscuits. But not on cake, because that's classed as a food. You pay VAT on crisps. You pay VAT on orange juice, but not on really sugary milkshakes. Get that all right. But I've got friends who've got a farm, and this is what these farmers are facing. It's 3 generations currently farming that farm, and there's a massive house and a farmyard, and the house is divided into 3 for the 3 gen. That alone is worth, on the local property market, more than £1 million. So the only thing that's going to happen when the mother dies, who's now in her 90s, is that they're going to have to sell the land.
And this idea that big tractors, that big combine harvesters, which are essential to farming your land, are assets, make you rich. Passing down your farm is in a farmer's DNA. They are family businesses. Once again, this is a massive economic own goal from Rachel Reeves. Like the pensioners, like the private schools thing, it's a massive economic own goal because she's not going to raise that much money, and it's so unpopular, and it's such an... I think it's a real shame that we're not on the November the 19th having this this massive onslaught of tractors into Whitehall and Parliament Square, and loads of mud and loads of
let's look at the
That would be
French. The
brilliant.
French do it properly.
Yeah, they do.
They know how to.
And the pro-Palestinian protesters do it properly as well, and Just Stop Oil do it properly.
They
but
get
the
a free
farmers,
pass.
the farmers aren't allowed. Make it make sense. We saw it during COVID, didn't we, where you could protest about George Floyd, but not about the crippling policy of lockdowns, which have made the mess that we're currently in. Folks, let's be clear about this. Labour will argue that their farmers' inheritance tax raid affects only a tiny fraction of most farming properties, and they're saying that they've got to pay for 14 years of Tory economic mismanagement. OK, folks, next up, as it's revealed, left-wing American women are depriving their partners in the bedroom for voting for Donald Trump. Is it wrong to use sex as a political weapon? We'll debate that next.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Her name is synonymous with fashion. Karen Millen, the high street designer whose dresses have been worn by some of the world's most famous women, including the Princess of Wales.
Yes, but in a recent Daily Mail interview conducted by our showbiz juggernaut, as I call her, Steph Tetchy, 63-year-old Karen confessed she isn't immune from worries about her appearance.
Well, this summer, Karen took the plunge with a £35,000 facelift using the very latest surgical techniques. Now, to hear more of her story, we're delighted to be joined by Karen herself and consultant plastic surgeon Dr. Tunç Tiryaki, co-founder of the London Regenerative Institute. So, how did you two get together?
That was a meeting at the Parliament, wasn't it?
It was, actually, yeah, through mutual friends, really.
So you already knew of Tunç and you knew his expertise. How did you come to the decision to kind of go ahead with this? I was reading the Mail article and apparently one day you looked in the mirror, and I've heard this story so many times before,
Yeah, I know,
from not least my mum and my nan,
Yeah.
and they said they looked in the mirror and thought, goodness me.
I
you
know. I think it's that menopausal thing when suddenly things just change. And, yeah, for me, it was coming out of lockdown almost, where I was probably on the back end of menopause, and I just, like, suddenly looked in the mirror and it was like, oh, my God, what's happened to me?
Because I guess I mean, for me, I'm 35, I still feel like a 20-year-old
Yeah,
or even an
absolutely.
18-year-old. Does that change as you get into sort of your...
Unfortunately not, right?
Well, it does change to a certain extent, but, you know, I've always looked after myself, so I've always kept fit and looked after my skin. So, you know, it did come as a bit of a shock. I mean, I know, obviously, ageing happens to us all and we have to embrace that, but there's a certain amount that we have to put up with, and then, you know, other things can step in.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop star to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Well, you'll love this story. As it's revealed, left-wing American women are depriving their partners of intimacy if they voted for Donald Trump. Is it wrong to use sex as a political weapon? Liz Kershaw.
Well, I thought left-wing women, educated women, like, you know, just a lovely picture, that sums it up, were supposed to be feminists. And it's not very feminist to use sex as a currency. It's like saying, I'm taking it from you because you like it, so I'm punishing you. But I'm just going through...
Is that your chat-up line, by the way? No. I felt like we got an insight into your private life there, Liz.
Right, OK. No, I'll no, I just think it's just not a very feminist stance to start with. But people have I mean, I have done things like this. I have judged people all my life, all my dating life. I've thought, no, I can't go out with him because he doesn't agree with he doesn't support the miners.
Right.
That was 40 years ago. I can't go out with him because he doesn't get Bruce Springsteen. Although now I'm going to seek that guy out because I feel the same way.
All right. So you were looking for a guy that likes Arthur Scargill and Bruce Springsteen.
Yeah.
Is that right?
But then there was Brexit. So if somebody said to me, if I was getting on well with somebody and they started banging on about, I'm a Remainer and Brexit's, we're all going to hell in a handcart, I'd say I'm just going to the ladies and I'd be climbing out of a window.
Yeah.
And then we've had so many. And then Boris, the other one that more recently, Boris Johnson, he's got to go. Why? Because he stood next to some limp sandwiches and warm Prosecco in a room he'd been working in all day in his birthday. All those kind of... So, yeah, I am a bit black and white.
All right. I mean, what do you think? Should politics should it split a couple up? Should it be an issue in a relationship?
Well, I'm just fascinated by these women. They're following these Korean women who did the same thing.
Yeah.
So these women in America are saying, delete your dating apps, regain sovereignty of your own body, all this stuff. Who is it a weapon against? Because, I mean, most men would be vastly relieved they don't have to sleep with these dreadful, weeping, lifty, liberal women. It's a weird thing, isn't it? Are they punishing Donald Trump? Because he certainly didn't want to sleep with them anyway. It's kind of...
I mean, it's probably not best to...
It's a bit like some of them are shaving their heads. Well, who wins? They end up looking like idiots. They end up looking like numpties with shaved heads. No one will want to sleep with them then, that's for sure, Mark.
Yeah. Does it work the other way? I just wonder, Matt, whether it's harder for men to go on a sex strike than women.
I wouldn't necessarily say that's the case. I've got to be really careful what I say here because obviously I'm the. This is the trickiest question actually of all you've asked.
You're sweating for the first time.
Yeah, it's difficult actually. No, look, I think that we need to be having more kids as a society.
Yeah.
And I think all the barriers need to be broken down.
You're on the left. Are you in a relationship? Are you married?
I am. I'm married. I've been married for 2.5 years.
All right.
You need to be careful what you say.
Imagine in the unlikely scenario that you were single, and you found somebody that was a good match, but they were a Tory. Would that be a problem?
I don't think it would. I don't think it would. I think
it took a long time to answer that question.
I mean, to be honest, my politics are quite nuanced anyway. Like, I'm not like tribally Labour.
But what if it was it was a kind of proper sort of Robert Jenrick sort of Uber fan? She's got, like, "We're leaving the ECHR" tattooed on her left bosom.
Yeah, I mean, probably not my type, but, like...
It's just, it gives you a red flag. I mean, as someone who... You go on a date with someone and they start banging on about, Remainer, that kind of thing, or Boris Johnson, this and that and the other. It's sort of a red flag to, oh, my goodness, what's...
So you wouldn't necessarily say no to a lefty, but you wouldn't want one of the lefties that's always being political and evangelical about it.
Exactly, and judgmental.
I think there's nothing nicer than when you meet somebody and you're like, oh, we both think like that. Oh, we both think like that. And then you say, I've never dared say this to anybody else before.
But I voted Brexit.
Because I get shot down. And then you find out... I mean, I know somebody in France who was so sort of careful to reveal to me that he'd voted for Marine Le Pen's party. And I know people in America who said... Well, I really like Trump, but if I said it on social media or if I said it in the office, I'd get fired by my employer.
Liz, briefly, can it work if someone on the left and on the right in a relationship? Can that work?
If they're really hot, I think you can overlook some small details.
An appropriately shallow answer, I would expect. Nothing less from the lusty Liz Kershaw.
Wow.
A woman of appetites, let me tell you.
But not for carbs.
No, maybe not. That's exactly right. Her body's a temple, as is Patrick Christie's. And he's up next. Hey, Patrick.
Hey, Mark, great show, as ever. Look, it's quite a heavy show in parts tonight. There's been Jew hunting on the streets of Europe. There's no other way to describe it, really. I've got Israel's Deputy Foreign Minister live on the show. Armed police at Manchester Christmas Market. I wonder why that is. 300 illegal migrants have been dumped into a small town in Greater Manchester. Going to hear from them. And the Archbishop of Canterbury, a report has found, knew about a child abuse scandal in 2013 and didn't report it. He says he won't resign. Well, I think that matter should be taken out of his hands, don't you?
Brilliant stuff. Patrick Christie's is up in just a couple of minutes' time. Thank you to my wonderful guests this evening, my Friday A-team. Well done. First appearance, first of many, I hope, from young Matthew. We also had the brilliant Liz and, of course, Emma as well. Listen, we've got a very busy weekend of Mark Dolan tonight coming up. Mark meets My Big Opinion and, of course, My Take at 10. Donald Trump may crop up, but we'll talk about what's happening in this crazy country too. See you tomorrow at 9. Patrick's next.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Evening. Thanks for joining me for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Kind of more of the same tomorrow. The weather patterns are slowly starting to shift, but again, grey and dry for most tomorrow. But there'll be, again, some sunshine